Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, I move that Parliament agrees to the establishment of a Truth and Reconciliation Commission by the government to facilitate open and free engagement in truth-telling and confront fears in view of conflicting statements and utterances regarding motives behind the political upheavals, so that closure and healing for Fiji is achieved and permanently put to rest this unfortunate and turbulent chapter of our independent history. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Yes, sir. I beg to second the motion.
Thank you so much, sir. And I now invite the Honorable Sashi Kiran to speak on our motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, sir. Mr. Speaker, Honorable Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Ministers, Opposition Leader, Ministers, Assistant Ministers, members of this august House, and people of our beloved nation, Nisa Mulavinakasaka and Sabko Mera Pranam. Mr. Speaker, the establishment of a Truth and Reconciliation Commission is long awaited. Our Honorable Prime Minister has promised the setting up of this all-important commission for very good reasons, as I try to articulate this in this motion. I'm grateful and honored that I've been asked by the Honorable Prime Minister and the coalition government to move this motion in the hope that it may become a significant step towards our nation building. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, it is our hope that the coalition government's task of rebuilding Fiji together for our future will reach greater heights after the work of this commission. National Prayer and Reconciliation Program, initiated by the President of the Methodist Church during Girmit commemoration, and participation of leaders and various faith groups in the event indicate that our people are ready for a healing process. Mr. Speaker, all three parties in the coalition government are firm in their commitment to see to the establishment of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. It's long overdue, sir, but it is better late than never. Some may ask whether this is the time for it. Some may say we should focus on cost of living and on better public services, and I understand. But Mr. Speaker, I know from my many long years of personal engagement with our people that a lot of people are hurting. There are many unresolved issues that need closure. Can we be a prosperous society if we live in fear and insecurity? If we do not trust our neighbors and carry wounded hearts, Mr. Speaker? Our nation has been plagued by political upheaval since 1987. Officially, we've had 4 coups, including that of 2000 and 2006. But other events have also caused pain and misery to many. Each time we recovered and tried to move forward with the hope that political upheavals would become a thing of the past. Sometimes we seem to make progress. The creation of the 1997 Constitution was a time when all sides of this House came together under the leadership of the man who was then and is again now our Prime Minister, together with the late Justice Jairam Reddy. The House voted unanimously for a new form of government and new ways of leadership. Sadly, Mr. Speaker, this was not to last. But this is not a time to dwell on that issue. Mr. Speaker, the sad events which have plagued our history themselves pass into history. After them, each time, Mr. Speaker, our economy has recovered. Sometimes we create new legal regimes and we all try to move forward. But we are also avoiding some hard truths. We are not looking deep inside ourselves to learn the lessons of the past. It is easier to look away from the painful events and perhaps pretend that they did not happen. But constant echoes of divide, narratives of the past remind us that there are deep-rooted wounds in many hearts unable to heal. Mr. Speaker, some of us can look away and pretend, but when we do this, we forget the pain and suffering of those who cannot. The destruction of lives and careers, displacement from homes, and physical and mental trauma, and these are passed down generations through painful narratives, keeping us trapped in intergenerational trauma. Not all of us can move on, Mr. Speaker. We need to come together as a nation to give true meaning to truth-telling and achieving genuine reconciliation, helping our current, past, and future generations to heal. Reconciliation is a process of healing of relationships that require public truth-sharing, apology, and commemoration that acknowledges and redresses past harms and violations. Its focus is to replace fear with a sense of security and peaceful coexistence, to build confidence and trust, and to develop empathy, Mr. Speaker. Coexistence, trust, and empathy has to develop between the individuals who are connected as victims, beneficiaries, and perpetrators. We have to create safe spaces for sharing our stories. We have to ensure all sections of our society are engaged, including our women, young, and elders. And there is continuity to ensure healing and closure, and narratives that help us move forward as a nation. Reconciliation requires political will, Mr. Speaker, joint leadership, trust building, accountability, and transparency. We in this House were entrusted less than 1 year ago with the votes of people exercising their democratic rights, the right to choose their leaders. And Mr. Speaker, sir, whether we are in the government or opposition, here we are all leaders. We are here because others put their trust in us. Mr. Speaker, that's why I hope that we will see our way unanimously to bring into being this Truth and Reconciliation Commission. This is not easy, Mr. Speaker. It requires us to become vulnerable, to tell our truth, to engage in dialogue with people we are not comfortable with, to be able to listen to them with an open mind and open heart, without judgment, with humility and with empathy. We have to give to those who have hurt us an honest chance to engage with us, to share honestly with them the impact of their actions on us. We also need to explore how we've dealt with our hurts. Hurt people, Mr. Speaker. We need to acknowledge and reflect on our own words and actions, engage honestly, and allow time and process to heal. This will not be easy, but healing and growth is never easy, Mr. Speaker, sir. We must do this. We cannot pass the pain and resentment of present generation to those of the future. We cannot burden their innocence with our past. Mr. Speaker, there are many lessons to learn from the Truth and Reconciliation Commissions of South Africa, Canada, Sri Lanka, and closer to home, the Solomon Islands. Our commission will have to take into account our cultural context and may have to have Fijian flavor. But let us be clear about one thing. This is not about one community forgiving or seeking forgiveness from another. This is not about divisions of race, religion, or province, even though those elements play a strong part in it. This is about each of us as human beings, with all honesty, to look deep into our hearts and confront the things that we have done, which may have caused deep loss or hurt to others, people of other ethnic groups, but also of our own. Race is not the only fault line in our country. Mr. Speaker, sir, after the civil unrest in 2000, I was part of a trauma healing and peace-building initiative led by Father Frank Hoare, an outstanding Colombian priest who has now been in Fiji for 50 years. Through this process, I was trained to be a peace facilitator. I joined a team for trauma healing in Northern Division. Our first facilitation was held in Savu. Our workshop created a space for many factions to come together. There were rebels, members of the security forces, villagers. They were all angry with the other, all angry and hurt. I did not facilitate that session, but what observed taught me new realities. For the first time, I saw that indigenous people considered themselves victims of the crisis, while many of us Indo-Fijians saw them as perpetrators. After a week-long process, raw emotions, and many tears, we realized that we were scratching the surface and there was a need for deeper process. As we traveled to Draketi, Mbua, Maduata, Wainingkoro, we saw many indigenous people in confusion. Some had lost their Indo-Fijian tenants and wanted them back. They had lost not just economic relationships, but personal friendships. We met Indo-Fijian tenants who felt they had no sense of security and were packing to leave. We also met indigenous youths who were embroiled in the civil unrest, taken to task by security forces, confused because they said they only had done what their elders told them to do. We met chiefs who said they thought they were fighting for a cause and were suddenly left high and dry to face the consequences on their own. I saw similar sentiments in Ra and Televu, making me, an Indo-Fijian, realize there are a lot of unresolved issues within the indigenous community also. When we had sessions with our armed forces, I realized that those who serve as trusted peacekeepers carry many burdens of trauma from their assignments and personal losses that go unacknowledged. I have listened to soldiers deeply affected by the 2000 mutiny. These emotions remain raw more than 2 decades later and needs a process and closure. Mr. Speaker, there is much more I can talk about here. I have not talked about the divisions within the Indo-Fijian community, the minority communities such as the Melanesians, some of whom still struggle with their sense of place and identity. But these are things that do not belong here. They belong to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that I hope we will all endorse and support. Mr. Speaker, this is such a beautiful nation in every way. Despite the differences, our people stand by each other, not only during sports and festivals and joyous times, but through every disaster we go through. Our own identities are intertwined. As Fijians, we are incomplete without the presence of the others. Only when we are able to heal and genuinely accept and love the other, we will truly have Fiji the way the world should be. We owe it to our future generations, Mr. Speaker, and I commend the motion to this august House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and may God bless Fiji with peace and prosperity. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable